I'm Elaine Cozart, and I'm your worship associate this morning. So nice to see so many people here today. Like many of you, I am a Unitarian Universalist convert. The biggest draw for me was the idea that we are all on our own spiritual journey in this life. That while our beliefs may not be the same, our shared values bring us together as a community. And it took me a while to get to this place. My family growing up was not particularly religious, but we occasionally attended services at a Lutheran church. For me, it was mostly a place for weddings, funerals, and crisis. An example of the latter was when I was 10, our house caught fire in the middle of the night, and then 3 months later, when we were rebuilding, I watched a tornado, we lived in Michigan, I watched a tornado blow up our house not far from the one that we almost lost. These random disasters made me an emotional, fearful mess of a kid after that, and my mom didn't know how to ease my fears. One time, she had the idea to call upon the Lutheran minister and come and offer support. A storm with the tornado watch was heading our way, and he agreed to come over and sit with us in the basement. And he led prayers during that time while we waited for the weather to calm down. It was intended to comfort me, but it only made me more afraid. To whom or what were we praying? God was such a mystery. The idea of calling upon him made it seem to confirm my fears that our situation was dire. Later, in my early 20s, I married an atheist. That belief seemed to make sense to me at the time because I only knew of one alternative, Christianity. But atheism felt only slightly less scary and a lot more isolating. When we divorced, I checked out several other houses of worship. My roommate, a recovering Catholic, took me to a non-denominational church that had a young, hip minister. I thought it was for me until he talked in not so many words about helping our gay brothers and sisters straighten up. There were other Christian churches in this time, but I couldn't fully embrace the idea of worshiping a God that was so judgmental. Fast forward a few more years to 1996. Steve, my husband of nearly 25 years, introduced me to East Shore Unitarian Church in Bellevue, Washington, shortly after we met. We had talked at length about our beliefs and our values, so when he took me to that first service at East Shore, I knew I had found my spiritual home. The minister, Peter Luton, spoke of accepting all people, didn't call me a sinner, preached on how to live our values using everyday examples and stories. And he had a great sense of humor. The sermons were so personal and relevant, and I could see myself raising a family in that community. In the many years since then, we have raised our family, our kids, in the Unitarian Universalist community. Danny is 21, a senior at University of Oregon, and Zachary is 19 and a freshman at Southwestern Oregon Community College. As I think back on their experiences, it makes me so proud that they got to have a voice in the classroom and right here in the pulpit. They learned about many world religious traditions, and they are considerate of those who are different from them. And they got perspectives about issues and ideas that they otherwise wouldn't have. It truly takes a UU village to raise a family. I feel so good knowing my kids have had that spiritual foundation, and this affirming faith home so that they can become the best people they can be as they navigate adulthood. From my own experience in the UU community, I've had the opportunity to share my time and talents and treasures in multiple ways. And one of my beliefs is that when you put out what you put out to the universe truly does come back to you. Actively participating in this congregation has provided me with so many gifts, like friendship and spiritual growth. And I want these wonderful gifts to be available to everyone for a very long time to come. Thank you.
Our reading today is from Erin Watham, who writes, "You cannot volunteer at your own church." She writes, "I balk at the secular nature of what it means to volunteer. Because to volunteer means that you are an outside resource stepping in to help an organization in need. Volunteering is what we do when we pick up trash at the park, or build a house with Habitat for Humanity, or help sort food at the local food pantry. Volunteering is what I do at my kids' school on Fridays. In other words, it's what you do at a place that is important to you, but not at a place that belongs to you. You cannot volunteer at your own church in the same way you cannot babysit your own kid. Because church belongs to you in the same way that family does. It's your own place. It's your own people. So of course you help take care of it. Of course you do yard work and make coffee and teach the kids and sing in the choir and whatever else it is you do for the home and the people that you love. You cannot volunteer in your own church the same way you cannot babysit your own kid. In this family, we go to church. It's what we do. The Grant family didn't go to church because they thought they'd go to hell if they didn't. Rather, the Grant family came to church because that's what we do. There was a deep sense of belonging to the community, to the congregation, and to each other. We all need some place to belong. We live in an era where we are defined by our political beliefs, by our consumer habits, by our age and gender, and where we are marketed to within an inch of our lives based on those factors online. We've developed tiny or not so tiny niche communities on social media based on our hobbies and interests. Person A may love woodworking and bullet journals. Person B may love shiny math rocks. What are shiny math rocks? What are shiny math rocks? Somebody knows what shiny math rocks are. Dice and role-playing games. Person C may love wine and cats. There is nothing wrong with having fandoms and interests, and in an era where 2/3 of teenage girls report being depressed, having a community of folks that supports one another is a really great thing. And while interests may perhaps be more niche today, I bet most of us had a favorite band that we loved in high school, and we knew the names of all the members, whether that was the Beatles or Duran Duran or NSYNC. Anybody have a favorite band? Yeah? Okay. Queen? Yes. But church gives us a whole different sense of belonging, because it's not all belonging based on what we like. And as a Unitarian Universalist congregation, it's not even exactly about what we believe. Joe can be an atheist, and Kate can love Buddhism, and Bill can find meaning in nature, and Joyce can be a humanist, and Jill can be a liberal Christian, and they can all find a place here. But this is a place where we choose to spend a couple of hours a week becoming better people. And what I mean by better people is more kind, more just, and more compassionate. Right? Who's going to argue with that? This is a place where we are gently challenged to think more broadly and welcome more people's stories. This is a place where we find value in multi-aged, multi-generational community, where we aren't just lumped in together, in my case, with other 55-year-old women, because how boring would that be? But rather, we are invited to talk with preschoolers and folks in their 90s. We are invited to talk with parents and non-parents and elders and teenagers and men and women and non-binary and gender-expansive folks, where we are more than what we wear or what we drive or what we eat or buy or consume. That's the kind of place I want to be. We go deeper here, and that matters. COVID taught us that the church is not just the gathered community on Sunday mornings. That church can take place online too, and that's super important that we continue to offer that, because sometimes you can't make it, and it's important to have options. Because some of us can't be around people safely while COVID and other diseases are still a thing. And because being open to all means being open to folks who can't physically get here for many, many reasons. But at least here, we have also learned that our connection is stronger when we physically gather together. When we're in one big room, singing or listening to a reflection or a sermon, when we share cookies and conversation, or potluck and classes, when we can notice, in the words of Annie Dillard, each other's beautiful face and complex nature, so that creation need not play to an empty house. My friend and colleague, the Reverend Kimberly Debus, writes of the quote from our reading today: "You cannot volunteer at your own church in the same way you cannot babysit your own kid." I like that line, she writes. Watham offers several terms for this role: discipleship, or mission, or the priesthood of all believers, or service. That's the one I like most, she writes. Because service gets to what we mean when we talk about shared ministry. And if we are to understand the meaning of the congregation as shared ministry, then we are all serving the congregation. Whether we are doing pastoral care, or building repairs, or nursery duty, or serving on the board, or ushering, or singing, or preaching, or working with the kids, whatever it is, we are in service to the congregation and sharing the ministry. We are not customers at the congregation we belong to. We are not members who get tangible benefits for pledging, like a tote bag or discounted tickets. We are not, I know. If you really want tote bags, we can get tote bags. We are not consumers of the church, we are the church. We belong to a congregation, and it also belongs to us, and we do not babysit that which is ours. Today is the kickoff of our annual stewardship drive. You might have heard that. The time of year where we ask members and friends of the congregation to pledge a percentage of their income to keep the church going. Much of the year we talk about volunteer hours, your commitments to the choir or the board or the Hope Food Pantry as your sustenance for the congregation. The ways you nurture that which is yours and are nurtured in return. But once a year, for about a month, we talk about your financial gifts. Because as important as your time and talents are, without your treasure, we wouldn't be here. The lights would be off, there would be no music, and no director of religious education, and no minister. You could do any of those things for a little while, like you will in March when I'm on sabbatical for a month. But this is a congregation that values its ministers and has always had one. This is my 8th year with you. Thank you. And the good news is I really, really love my job. I feel supported and valued, and we do good work together, whether that's on the board or the executive team or the administration or the worship associates. We have built relationships, and we tell the truth to each other. and we cheer one another on toward our mission of inviting community, inspiring spiritual growth, and igniting action for justice. I am so honored to know you and your families, and memorialize your loved ones, and dedicate your children, and support you in the deep questions of life. And I love how this community supports me with a minister's discretionary fund that supports both the congregation and the community with rent money that keeps a family in their house or keeps the electricity on. I love that once in a while, I get to feel like a damn hero because someone comes in who has had a string of bad luck and says, "Thank you. You kept believing in me and praying for me and helped me, and my SSI just came through, and I'm going to be in permanent housing." That happened last week, and you let me do that because it's not my money, it's yours. And what we do here matters. It matters to the family who gets a place where their gender nonconforming child gets to be loved and supported. It matters to the elder who gets visits while they're recovering from an auto accident and can't be at home. It matters to the overwhelmed parent who gets an hour of peace and meaning at the end of a busy week. It matters to a group of retired folks who have found deep friendships here and somehow decided that cleaning the kitchen together or pulling weeds outside or pulling rotted wood out of the roof is a more worthwhile way to spend time with their friends than playing bridge. I like that. You get out of this place what you put into it. Now, I know that some of you here are brand new. You have walked in for the first time today, and you're like, I don't know if this is my place yet. What are you doing? That's okay. That's okay. But some of you know that this is your place. And it's time to support your place. We don't have seat fees or a practice of tithing. Some of us have a lot of financial resources, and some of us have very little. Our pledges waive from waivers or about $120 a year to over $20,000. The average pledge that we need is about $2,100 per pledging household. For some of us, that number is ridiculously out of reach, and that's just fine. For some of us, that's a quarter of our vacation budget, and so maybe you can pledge more. Our congregation is not run on the money in the collection plates. That money supports Hope and our other special collections, but it makes up less than 2% of our budget. About 80% of our budget is made up of pledges, with the balance being rentals and a few fundraisers like the auction. We just lost our biggest renter, Folk Time, because they missed reapplying for their grant, and so they lost their funding. It is a big loss to the community, and it's a loss to our budget. We're looking for another renter, but in the meantime, we have an $11,000 hole in our budget. The vast majority of our budget, what does our budget do? It pays for salaries and benefits for our staff. Myself and Mary, our Director of Religious Education, and Ashley, who plays the piano, and Vivian and Barb in the office, and Amy and Sojourner, and Francesca in the nursery. About 10% goes to facilities, including the mortgage and insurance and utilities. About 6% goes to the Unitarian Universalist Association in the form of dues. Y'all did a huge thing last year, and after a few years of starting to fall off the UUA salary scales for our region and size, you bumped Mary and I up to the midpoint on the salary scales, and we are truly grateful for that. You tried for like 3 years to make it happen, and last year it happened. It is one of the many ways in which you make us feel supported and valued, and we thank you. And this year, we have to match other increases. Health insurance, building insurance, and utilities are all going up. It takes money to keep a congregation running. But being here together matters. Widening the circle so more people feel welcome here matters. Stretching ourselves so more and more people feel welcome here, and we make folks who don't always look like us or act like us, but who share our liberal religious values, is our spiritual task. We do not babysit that which is ours, but neither do we claim that our family is complete and we circle the wagons and we don't let anybody else in. Our job, our spiritual task, is to widen the circle, to make space at the table for another and another and another, and maybe we make another damn table and we pull it up alongside, because there is always room for one more. What we do here matters. We are called to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God, which is just another name for love. It matters that we drag our butts to church even if we'd rather be in bed. It matters that we show our kids what we value, not what we wear or buy or consume. It matters that we spend a couple of hours every week stumbling together towards being better people. It matters that we keep widening the circle. It matters that there is always room for one more. And it matters that we support this place because it is ours. When that packet comes in the mail next week, please remember that this is your place. And consider how valuable that is to you. May it ever be so. Blessed be, and amen.